Ever since the mass shooting at a Texas elementary school, there's been a growing national outcry for new gun control legislation. Gun violence has rippled through too many communities recently, many calling this an epidemic.
It's also become a leading cause of death among U.S. youth. Here locally, a partnership is working to get results and change that.
They're calling it a day of hope. So joining us now to talk about it is Dr. L. Trenton Marsh, a UCF professor, and he told me to call him.
Well, no, that's the boys call me Mr. T. The boys call me Mr. T.
Mr. T. Gotcha,
we like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's first talk about this, a day of hope, and what that entails.
Sure. Well, let's even go back to the genesis. So the genesis was back in fall of 2019. Myself and some colleagues were called to the Boys and Girls Club to analyze some data that the young people have taken. Roughly 1,400 young people took a survey about their social and emotional learning. And there were 4 key areas where they were struggling, specifically for 9 to 12-year-olds. So that was physical safety, emotional safety, teamwork, and conflict resolution. So this was the first time that an organization had experience where, okay, if you're a young person, not only were you being bullied in school, now you're going to an after-school program with your bully, right? So it makes sense that these 4 areas would be really, really key. Myself and some colleagues, we essentially created an intergenerational mentoring program where the older adults, or excuse me, the older young people were meeting with the younger young people just to have conversations like, what would you have told your younger self now what you know at age 14, 15, 16 years old. The unfortunate part is that COVID-19 came and we weren't able to assess that curriculum. However, at the top of this year, I received funding to do an impact assessment of that curriculum. 2 weeks before going to the Boys and Girls Club, I received a phone call from Director Tasha. She's the director of the Levis Youth Clubhouse, and she said, Dr. Marsh, one of my young men were killed last weekend. He was killed in the streets. Can you just come have conversations with our young men? So myself and some colleagues, specifically social workers who are trained social workers, who were my students at the time, we went and just had conversations, listened and listened, and more listening, more listening, more listening. And after all these listening sessions, the young men are particularly were like, Mr. T, like there's hope here. And so we reframed hope. So hope stands for Healing Oasis for Peace and Empowerment. So Thursdays, we meet every Thursday, meeting with the 14 to 15 young men each week. And it's like, okay, well, we can't just meet just to meet. Let's have, like, what are we going to talk about? Well, let's memorialize, our fallen friend. What can we do? So they said, hey, let's go from the Boys and Girls Club and let's walk and march to Lake Eola. So all their idea, completely their idea. In fact, this shirt, Day of Hope, I don't know if I'm able to share.
Yeah,
sure.
please, of course.
So this is a design that this is their design. I'm not sure where so this is their design.
Okay.
This is a design that they had created. And so again, we'll be wearing these shirts. And essentially it's just highlighting that these young people are against, obviously, youth violence. They're against gun violence, particularly in the localized context.
And you mentioned, I think, a key word when you were talking about the genesis of all this was listening. And you had all these listening sessions and listening to the youth. And I know that tomorrow part of it is that people who attend this rally will get to hear from some of these young men. What is that message and why is that so important for people to come out and hear that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, part of the message is, okay, if we're talking about community policing, is there a way that we can do this without dialing 911? Can we actually engage and have conversations with each other? I think that is clearly the message that the young men want to emphasize. They also want to emphasize this idea of compassion, not just compassion for self, but compassion for others and community. And so if folks come out tomorrow, which we really do hope that they'll come out, we're going to be led by the incoming chief, Chief Eric Smith is going to be our Grand Marshal. We have the Young Blacks in Action, a little drum cohort who will lead us to the procession to Lake Eola. We have young men, they've created poetry. They're going to be sharing their poems or their stories about why Hope Circle is important to them, why a healing oasis and this idea of coping and coping strategies are so important and so prevalent now because, right, we know about what happened in Texas, we know what happened in California, we know what's happening in New York. All of these things are intersecting, but what can we do collectively as a community? And I think that would be the message that they're going to be conveying.
And so moving forward, we have this big event tomorrow. What do you need from the community moving forward to get results and bring some change to a lot of the violence that we're seeing?
Absolutely. So actually at the end of the march, I should say at the end of the rally, there's actually going to be a pledge. The young men created a pledge with each other, a pledge that they have individually, but they think that this pledge can actually reflect and mirror outwardly for the community. So the folks are going to be signing a pledge or kind of articulating a pledge that the young men are going to be leading from the podium. And then part of that pledge is an ongoing conversation and dialogue about how can we do these things together. So at this point, we just really want people to come out and to support us, really support the young people's voices, and so we can be a community together.
Yeah.
And so if people want to join you tomorrow, where do they need to show up? What time?
Perfect. So we'll be at the Levy Shoes Clubhouse, which is in Paramore. That's where we'll start at 10:30, where we'll have food, some check-ins, some opening kind of motivation. At 11:15, we're going to march to Lake Eola, which is 1.1 mile walk. I tell folks all the time, it's only 1.1 miles.
Yeah,
right.
But in Florida, 1.1 miles in the heat can be about from 20 to 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So we've allotted that time. And then from 12 to 2, that will be the rally at Lake Eola.
And hopefully this is the start of, more events and more ways people can get involved and, really make an impact on the young people.
100%. The goal is, although we're calling it a day of hope, it's multiple days, right? It's something that we're thinking about continuously, not just Saturday on June 11th.
Well, thank you for listening.
I appreciate y'all.
All right, thanks for coming.